Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the other side of the webcam market. I've covered quite a few webcams, and I still have a lot on my to-do list on the channel with regards to content creation, live streaming, YouTubing, vlogging, things like that, and my frustration with them, and how there seems to be little innovation in the market, and you have little control over the cameras, and there's basically Logitech and a couple Microsoft cameras, and that's it on the market. But there are very different sides of the market that a lot of content creators don't look at. And I've been trying to get into it for a little while, and I finally reached out to a company called Systems, who have sent over their Hyperion webcam, which is quite the name for a camera. I love it. And I will say up front that this is not a camera designed for content creation whatsoever. But that's how I'm going to be covering it, but I'm also going to touch on how it's supposed to be used. You see, this camera is an industrial camera. There's an entire market, an entire industry of integrated and otherwise built to suit, basically, cameras and webcams for specific industry-related purposes, such as, actually, they have a whole list they provide on their website of target applications for this camera. Indoor and outdoor smart home surveillance. So this kind of camera may end up in a security camera that you install in your home, and you just won't know it. They're parking lot management, car dash cams and backing up cameras, embedded into other devices, digital microscopes, mining, kiosks, video conferencing, things like that. Video conferencing, of course, being as close as we can get on that list to this purpose right here. This camera, however, comes with no enclosure. It has some exposed surface mount components in the PCB, and it's got a heatsink on the back, and there's no mounting solution whatsoever. So I'm using a pretty ridiculous mounting solution here. So I have my normal wall mount for my normal camera here, which is my Panasonic G7, which is literally anchored into the wall. So I have a friction arm mounted to that wall mount arm coming off. Why? Coming off of the friction arm, I have a smartphone clamp that's typically used to put your phone up here and vlog this way, and I just have the camera barely strapped in there, so I'm glad my cat didn't just rip that off the mount and send this all crashing and crumbling down. If you do want to use this kind of camera for content creation, you will have to get creative in your mounting, but you can totally 3D print a case. The two modules that it consists of, it can actually separate, and you can use that to further embed in your existing device. It has a mini USB 2.0 connection, which normally I would complain about, but again, for this purpose, that's the idea. And it comes with a fairly short cable. I've had to use a separate cable here to get the length running to my computer. You can see it dangling in the corner of the screen. It comes with one that is designed to be compatible with low power USB ports, so it has two ends so it can get all the power that it needs, and this is literally just a StarTech cable. However, you don't need to use both ends if you're using a desktop plug with, full power draw, and that's what I'm using here, just a standard mini USB plug. You're good to go. This camera goes up to 1080p, 60 frames per second in H.264, and it can do 720p, 60, and things like that, and then it can do 1920 by 1072. My cat is talking to the birds. It can do 1920 by 1072. Apparently those 8 pixels were enough to make the difference in terms of bandwidth or processing power in MJPEG mode. Now, despite the fact that it uses more bandwidth apparently and can only be used in the 1072 mode, the MJPEG mode, in my opinion, looks worse. So I am using the H.264 mode now. I did a little behind the scenes vlog for my Patreons and channel supporters and things like that in the MJPEG mode, so I will include a clip of that here, but personally I have gotten the best results out of the H.264 mode. So in terms of specs, that's what you're working with. Again, for purely content creation purposes, not the best possible scenario. I would want USB 3 with YUI 2 or something like that. But for what this is pretty cool. And the quality you get from it is actually okay. And I'm going to touch on something that's really cool about it in a moment. Now, it has a manual, I believe it's an M2 mount lens. So you actually focus it, and this is going to drive people nuts, but you focus it by screwing the lens closer or further away to nail focus here. So using my beard as a focus point, I believe that's in focus now. And overall, it looks fine. So if you wanted to use something like this for content quality, like most people aren't going to notice, and if you're using it to build into your next project, this is honestly going to serve you quite well. And this isn't the only thing they offer by any stretch. I actually receive pretty much at this point, I think, weekly emails from them ever since I started working with them on this project. Words are hard today, which is what I say in every video. Ever since I got on their email list, like they're announcing new cameras with HDR and all sorts of craziness, new modules to implement into projects, and they have a lot going on. So this is by no means their only offering. But what is really cool about this camera is it has a wide dynamic range and high dynamic range mode. Now this is not video production TV HDR that you would get in like a 4K Blu-ray or something. It's not that kind of HDR. The HDR here is a literally high dynamic range, which for a camera is important. And you might notice in this video, especially compared to literally any other video I've posted, you can see everything. Everything. I have a big LED panel here blasting my face with light, which is what I normally use for my normal camera setup, and you can still see me just fine. I am lit up. I am fully exposed here. I might be a tad overexposed here, but it gives me that beautification filter look, which helps cover my eye bags. You can see my entire living room lit up that's normally in darkness because of the contrast of the harsh light here versus the darker light back there. The window isn't blown out, even though it's 11 a.m. It is super freaking bright outside right now. Normally this window's blown out on any camera. The back window back there is always for sure blown out, and it's only sort of blown out in that very back sliver. And even the direct sources of light are not as glowy blown out as they normally are. This is the power of something that has actual high dynamic range sensor inside of it. This is really freaking cool. You can see everything, which helps a lot with composing your video. I will show, even though it will be from a different angle, I will show the difference of what you get with this kind of sensor versus an $800 camera, the Sub 2R, which doesn't have a high dynamic range sensor. It has a very low dynamic range sensor, and you get and this is a very common problem among webcams, where you get hot spots where you are completely blown out and then everything else is really dark. With this, you get a clean, clear picture ready to go. For comparison's sake, this is what my Panasonic G7, my main camera, looks like in the exact same lighting 5 minutes after finishing the rest of this recording here. Setup. Again, I'm not blown out, I'm sharper. I'm working with the 4K signal. It's clearly a superior looking image with much greater depth of field and a bigger sensor and yada yada. But the actual dynamic range of what you see throughout the room is actually lower, even if, there's more detail for what you do see and yada yada yada. But that window's blown out, it's much darker in the background. This is the comparison I wanted to give you, because there are a lot of use cases, even for content creation, where you'd want everything fairly evenly lit up. So there you go. And for another point of comparison, this is another indie developed webcam camera, industry camera, tinkerer's camera, that uses a similar kind of sensor and costs $800. This is the Sub 2R, which is a camera that, as I continue to use it, I discover has a terribly low dynamic range, to the extent that if I get too close to my light, I get blown out, but everything otherwise is pretty dark and gritty. That helps show just how cool the Hyperion actually is. It's not the sharpest image in the world. It's not the most clean image in the world due to compression artifacts and things like that. And you can get some weird muddiness of super sharp details when you move around a little bit. But for the purposes of Twitch streaming and stuff, honestly, it's fine. This is awesome. This camera is really cool. And the fact that you don't have to mess with auto, you don't have to worry about it going out of focus. If you end up moving around a lot and you need autofocus, obviously this won't be the solution for you. But in most cases, especially for this kind of video, you are posting up a camera in one spot and that is it. So I am super happy with this. I know that a lot of people are going to be like, that doesn't look like very good. But for what it is, this is seriously impressive, especially compared to most webcams out there. A problem you will notice in some of the footage is that the backlights have a weird kind of flicker to them, and this is due to the camera being set to a PAL refresh rate, and it doesn't give me the option for any sort of NTSC option, which is a little frustrating as someone here in the States with NTSC cameras, and they probably sell different cameras with NTSC options, but with NTSC power, you get this weird kind of flicker, and it's trying to compensate for it and try to mitigate it. But that's what that is, and if you're in the PAL region, it's fine. But I'm sure they have a NTSC option somewhere. So as I've said, this isn't the perfect webcam solution for anybody. This isn't even a webcam targeted at content creators, but there is a whole industry here, and I recommend, they're not paying me for this, they're not looking at this video before it's posted, anything like that, but I do recommend just going to their website, at the Econ Systems website, and looking at all the different webcam models they have, because even as someone who myself has expressed sentiment of frustration that there isn't enough webcams on the market, there isn't enough innovation and stuff, just seeing how many webcam modules and sensors and things that they have implemented on the market that are there is pretty crazy. Like, there is a lot here. One thing I also wanted to mention is that Econ Systems provides a ridiculous amount of documentation and information about the camera once you're signed in with the little code that comes in your box. That the box comes with the lens, the camera, the cable, and a little download code. They give you the app for Linux, the app for Windows, product sheets, data sheets. They give you a firmware updater. They give you so much information, much more than most of the mainstream options actually give you, which they kind of need to if you're supposed to be developing projects from this device. I want to run through a couple specs here. This does have a 2 megapixel Sony Starvis IMX290 sensor on it. And then again, it has the little M2 mount lens that comes with one in the package. The main actual mode for this is 640 by 360. However, you can, of course, bump it up to 1080p 60 here, as I mentioned. It can take JPEG or BMP photos. It has digital zoom up to 16 times. I'm not going to mess with that. It does have a denoise filter. So they do have the Ecamm View software, and then it's called QT Cam on Linux, because this is a UVC capable webcam, and so it works on Windows and Linux, and they have officially support it on both platforms and provide a program. The camera app that they include, however, I do run into some frustration where I can't seem to get it to actually record anything higher than 640 by 360, but they have 3 different modes. They have the HDR1 mode, which should be what this is in. They have the HDR2 mode, which in this specific situation, I didn't notice a lot of difference, but again, for situations where you're like driving around outside or embedding in certain use cases, it might be worthwhile. And then they actually have a low light night mode, which I'm going to test this evening and include a clip in this video. Although it may be at super low resolution due to the application, but they have an actual night mode to see more in the dark, which is really cool. So it's expensive for what most people would want to buy for a webcam, because it is $99. Again, it's cheaper than the Sub 2R, which is $800. You can't really see it behind my mic arm, but it's back there. It's cheaper than a lot of webcams for 1080p 60. And while I typically spend my time in my content creation videos complaining about devices that give pre-compressed H.264 footage because there's more latency, I think there's about 9 frames of latency from my audio mixer interface to the webcam. Like I have to delay the video or delay the audio by one or the other. I don't remember which at this point. But, you know, there's a 9 frame difference of the audio and video coming in that you have to account for, and you can account for that in OBS or what have you. And, you know, your system has to spend more effort decompressing the footage and recompressing it and things like that. But for a lot of people, especially with a decently high-end system, it's not going to matter. And this image is a lot better than most people's webcams that is completely like blown out or completely dark and things like that. Like, this is a really good image, especially if you want to do traditional vlogging or like a video where you need people to see what's going on and not just have a dramatic, like high contrast video like I normally post. This might be a solution for you. And the point of this video was just to introduce you to this market. These are cameras designed for industry applications. Again, microscopes, car backup systems, security cameras, things like that. But you can put them in anything. They sell them to you to implement into anything. And that's really cool. So just wanted to share this with you. Product link to them on the Hyperion, again, sick name, on Econ Systems website will be in the link in the description below. It's not an affiliate link or anything like that. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more tech education. I'm EposVox, here to make tech easier and more fun. I will see you in the next video.